Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Nermeen Sheikh.
Today, let me open up today's episode for you to explore an American family's relentless pursuit of truth, integrity, and justice. This is the narrative of Jonathan and Suzy Lamb, former leaders at Daystar television that faced spiritual abuse and bullying from Joni Lamb, the mother of Jonathan, alongside her cohorts. In this video, we show you the key moments that overturned their lives and careers to a massive confrontation in 2023. An encounter which led them to question not only their beliefs, but their own kin. Please just bear with us as we unravel the truth about spiritual emergencies, and the various wars with what and whom they were able to turn against each other. She said, "Hi, sweetheart. It's me, Joni." Jonathan immediately said, "Hi, Joni. How are you doing?" This followed by smash. "I ain't really married." Joni replied, "Hi, Jonathan, but I am married." Jimmy Evans grinned from ear to ear. This meeting regulators called destiny would have ripple effect, which usher in the life-changing circumstance they required. Spiritual abuse or spiritual staff control at Daystar. Jonathan Lamb and his spouse, Suzy of Daystar, also affirmed that during their time at Daystar, they were frequently subjected to spiritual abuse and bullying, heading by Jonathan's mom, Joni Lamb, and her cronies. This, the couple stated, was in replenishment on July 11th, 2023, when Joni invited Jimmy Evans, a Christian marriage counselor, for a meeting. Jonathan's wife, Joni, is an evangelist who runs her own ministry. Her eagerness is to encourage couples to remain loyal to their vows. However, Joni assumes godlike dominance over Jonathan, similar to that which was tried by Jonathan Evans, the founder of XO Marriage. On one point, Evans, in a particularly recorded session, says to Jonathan, "Submission means she is the voice of God to you." Jonathan, clearly taken aback, asks for clarification. "So I can't hear from God? I have to hear from her?" Evans then snaps back, "What she says is God." This, however, was just the start of a stormy phase of their lives, of the Lambs. These pressures are made worse by the fact that they were already emotionally strained, due to a family scandal that began 2 months shy of about 2 years ago. Family betrayal and sexual abuse allegations and the pain of a strained marriage. About 2 years before the meeting in July 2023, Jonathan caught a family member in a compromising position with his daughter. He directly pointed to this relative as a pervert and a child molester, which led to one of the worst family scandals. Instead of endorsing the allegations John Bann alleged against them, Joni and her late husband, Marcus Lamb, who co-founded the station, vouched for the accused family member. They said he was innocent. This led to a very deep-seated division between family members, as Jonathan not only felt let down by his mother, but the people he felt he could trust enough to protect his family. 3 months later, and in late August 2021, Marcus, who has publicly led Daystar, informed Jonathan and Weiss that their family member had been exonerated by an internal investigation. But later, Jonathan and Suzy found such investigation to be lacking seriously in something. That is how they were disappointed in the handling of the situation. Less than a year after he graduated, and a few months after everything was published, Marcus died from COVID-19 complications. That was another tragedy in his life, his death complicating the family affairs. For Joni, later on remarried Doug Weiss, a sex therapist whom she had met shortly after the death of Marcus. Jonathan and Suzy, like the rest of Joni's children, could not accept the marriage, primarily because they considered Doug Weiss to have no scriptural reasons to divorce his first wife. Some people worried that Joni was cheating on him through marriage, particularly with the details of the divorce they had seen. This created fear that resulted into a passionate appeal from one of the oldest friends of Daystar and a counselor, Denise Boggs, who wrote a letter to Joni's family telling them to act. Some of the Boggs labeled Doug as a wolf in sheep's clothing and felt that Joni was being taken advantage of by him. She even fired up Joni for being in spirit of deception, arising from the relationship she was conducting with Doug. In response to this, Jonathan assembled all his family members in order to stare down Joni for an explanation, but Joni interrupted everyone after 5 seconds of talking about their problems. The confrontation stopped when Joni headed to New York with Doug. And at this point, Jonathan as well as Suzy started feeling rather uncomfortable about the marriage and then the appearance in front of Jimmy Evans just a few months afterward. recession, bullying, and the advocacy victims struggle. The July 11, 2023 meeting with Joni, Jimmy Evans, and the Lambs was not centered on the marriage but power. Although he had forbid his daughter to see them, Joni and Evans attempted to pressure Jonathan and Suzy into endorsing her marriage to Doug, contrary to everybody's disapproval in the family. One day, Jonathan and Suzy decided not to read a viewer comment to them that applauded Joni for her marriage because they thought it would be giving approval of something they did not agree with or support. Joni was livid at them. She started accusing them of rebellion and told Suzy that she would fire her from her duties in Daystar if she disemboweled. They do not even listen to him in the meeting where Joni and Evans attempts to dominate Jonathan and order him around. Evans once was so similar to say to Jonathan that he is rebellious for not submitting himself to Joni, or to say that he opened the door to demonic activity in his own family. He also said that their disagreement was witchcraft sin. In other words, he compared it to idolatry. Joni was equally persistent, telling Jonathan that failure to submit would attract curses on him and his children. Jonathan was stunned and angry at what he considered coercive actions. Although he attempted to clarify his position for Joni, she persisted. She even tried to turn him against Suzy. She said, "Jonathan has to decide between her and Suzy." As Joni continues the episode, when Jonathan tries to reassure her, stating that they are on the same page, she ignores this and goes on to engage in further manipulative. At some point, Suzy lost her job, and that pressure never eased up. Subsequently, Jonathan emailed Joni that they see themselves cornered in a lose-lose situation. It was becoming almost intolerable. But instead of showing apprehension, Joni merely said that payroll would not be changed for the meantime. For Jonathan and Suzy, it was already clear that they have to fight for their ideas, but it was the beginning of the consequences. The struggle for truth and justice. The provided Lamb's tragedy of Jonathan and Suzy Lamb has been a story full of betrayal, spiritual abuse, and a long ongoing battle for truth and justice. Facing years of emotional stress and spiritual grooming within Daystar television network, the couple's fight has been not only personal but public as well. The demands coming from own family and also the workplace they experienced as suffocating, and that led them to feel hopeless. However, one needs to understand that Jonathan and Suzy have preferred today not to remain silent any longer. Their conflict arose when Jonathan learns a dark and distasteful family secret of molestation by a relative. Instead of getting help from his mother, Joni Lamb, and the Daystar church leadership, he was met with opposition and a formidable cover-up. The decision taken by Joni, who supported the accused relative instead of her own son, opened a break which was to widen as time went on. Emotionally, this was a huge drain, but it was just a small precursor to a much larger and more destructive war that would be waged over the course of the next years. Likely as the story unfolded, Jonathan and Suzy received more pressure from Joni and supporters within the Daystar assembly. The power they assumed in the two's professional spheres emerged as distinct. Forcing Jonathan and Suzy, most especially in their matters of faith, marriage, and career, added to the conflict that Joni kept on relating as a struggle for independence. Perhaps one of the grueling areas touched in this struggle was Joni referring to herself as being godlike authoritative, especially to Jonathan but equally to Suzy too. With the help of Jimmy Evans, a famous Christian marriage therapist, Joni tried to make John over into her image again, as she had previously done, so that he felt he had no choice but to do as she wished and ultimately would doubt his own ability to reason and to listen to God's guidance. The Lambs were also embarrassed and both physically and spiritually coerced, while being told that if they did not submit to Joni authority, then most certainly negative things would befall their family. Curses. It was this point when the viewers saw that their faith is used as a weapon against them, and that the good family's values are turned into the rallying cry to achieve goals of the privileged few. Jonathan tried to fight for what he believed in, but such an effort only made him more ostracized. Suzy, who was also harassed by Joni, faced being fired from at Daystar. But Jonathan and Suzy didn't stop there. They started getting vocal so as to denounce the abuse and manipulation they had suffered through. Their demand for justice was no longer gained to have revenge. They fought for justice as for their religion, their family, and for themselves as right to live without hiding. The journey was not going to be an easy one. It was, however, clear that their goal to get to the bottom of the murder and see to it that the perpetrators were brought to book was not going to be shaken off by any force. In the next episode, they're going to share with their audience how the fight for justice goes on, as well as showing us what difficulties they encounter. The consequences of hidden secrets. Confidentiality, denunciation, and sinfulness. The Lamb family's collapse is functioned on the basis of the prose of local sins and obscure motifs. All the while, Jonathan and Suzy Lamb's story progresses. New revelations indicate that the two went through something more than spiritual abuse and professional domination. Instead of trust, which is normally expected in families, there was betrayal. Instead of loyalty, there was treachery, and instead of a desire for order, there was need to regain control over one's life. This drama focusing on betrayal, which has reached the point when it almost shattered the Lamb family. The revelation that one of his relatives was involved in sexual misconduct with his daughter was the trigger for change, which compelled Jonathan not only to learn a distasteful family truth, but also betrayal of the closest people with whom he could trust. His accusations were dismissed by his mother, Joni, and her husband, Marcus, who started the company Daystar with her. In defense of the accused relative, Joni and Marcus turned against Jonathan's statement for holding on to power to protect his family and derided it as ungrounded. His own mother failed to support him, and this made Jonathan feel alone and severely betrayed. The family scandal, however, was only the beginning of the breaks in the family of Lamb. The division intensified even further when Marcus died from COVID-19, and after that Joni married Douglas Weiss, who had quite an unpalatable background. The new marriage could not be accepted by Jonathan and other family members, mainly because they thought Doug's divorce was unjustified, and there were no scriptural bases for the divorce. Douglas started to force her into believing that everything he did was good for her. The more the family became worried for Joni, they feared that Douglas was using her. This was evident as Joni was receiving letters from trusted counselors, such as Denise Boggs, informing her of the dangers of her relationship with Douglas. This clearly divided loyalty within the family would only increase suspicion and distrust of one another over time as the months went on. This feeling of betrayal became worse when Jonathan caught Joni getting married to Doug. After that, a public confrontation which showed how differed the family became next. Joni, who also did not listen or speak, thinking that a confrontation would be best held, she stormed off. This was serious for John and Suzy, as other attempts aimed at mediating within their family proved to be impossible. Despite this demonstration of care, Joni continued to offer no courtesy for their feelings by neglecting to respond or give any consideration to what they had to say. This only drove them away, and they started to doubt possibility to renew the friendship. These kept secrets would follow them throughout their lives, the family's secret really influencing their career paths and interpersonal relationships. Succumbing to the pressure exerted on Daystar and its leadership, Joni, Jonathan, and Suzy were winched further and further away from each other, their careers sinking to the abrasive which Jonathan and Suzy faced. The suffering of the Lamb family rightly illustrates the consequences of keeping and betrayal as secrets within families. It's going to be quite a long and heart-wrenching fight, but Jonathan and Suzy is ready to pursue until the very end. In the subsequent chapters of this real-life story, readers will learn how the Lamb family persistently seeks justice and healing in the heart of this true-life saga. What lies ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear. Mr. and Mrs. Lamb have just got the start in the discharge of their mission of justice and law. More of the story will be aired next episode, and we enjoy the episode. This is a story of victory, of separated truth, and trials for justice. We only hope that it has left you pondering the act of rising up against spiritual abuse and betrayal. If you have benefited from this video, don't forget to click the thumbs up, share it with friends and family, and also click the subscribe button for more content.